final season of the 4-team playoff is off to a great start, in my opinion. I think both of those games were really good. We did a poll, by the way, on PWTB, which was the best of the weekend. And a lot of people thought Alabama, Michigan was the best. But either way, just tremendous games on both sides. Even a wacky ending to the Washington and Texas game. I may have my thoughts on that in a little bit. Washington does eke out the win, though. But yeah, it's setting up for an amazing championship, I think, between a very good defense, an elite defense in Michigan, and an elite quarterback, but also an offense too. We'll get into that in Washington. But Jordan, I'm gonna turn it over to you. Let's start previewing this championship.
All right. I just want to bring up the fact that this is the third time in 10 years that we've had a national championship game between two 14-0 teams. Obviously, Washington is 14-0 and Michigan is 14-0 as
That's
well.
it. Wow, interesting. Huh.
Third time in 10 years.
Hmm.
Clemson, Alabama, one time was, and off the top of my head, I don't remember the other one. I
I'm just
apologize.
saying you would expect that to be higher, but that's
Right.
really interesting. Yeah.
You really would. You really would. Um, so how both teams got here, right? The last week, Michigan defeating Alabama in what I thought was a classic Rose Bowl. I gave my thoughts whether, I thought Alabama deserved to be there, but they delivered with the great game with Michigan, but the Wolverines did come out on top in overtime, 27-20. And then down in New Orleans, you had Washington defeat Texas in a high scoring game where Michael Penix Jr. just went off. 430 passing yards. Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, Romo Dunze had field days against the Texas secondary. The Longhorns tried to catch up, but did not have enough offensive firepower. So here we are with the Huskies and Wolverines.
Yeah, I think I I really think if you watch the Alabama Michigan game especially, what happened early? Michigan's defense was getting after Jalen Milroe. They were getting a lot of sacks. They were getting a lot of penetration in the background. Well, what's the expression? The unstoppable force versus the unmovable object, or something like that.
Unstoppable force versus the immovable object.
Immovable, right? This is what this is right now. Because you have Penix who's throwing it all over the field, and you have a Michigan defense who is, I think, either one or two by all metrics around the country this season. So that's gonna. But I think Michael Penix is still gonna throw well. He's gonna have a good game. No offense, he's better than Kyle McCord. He's better than any quarterback Michigan's faced so far. So that's gonna be a big deal. Michigan's gonna have to adapt to that. But I think if they get the rush going like they got after Milroe, yes, Milroe had some success on the ground later on, but eventually Michigan's defense prevailed, only holding Alabama to 20 points. But make Penix uncomfortable. That's what they're going to have to do, because even though he has an elite arm, one of the best arms I've seen in quite a while, coming out of college at least, he's still prone to, get a little nervous, maybe throw a pick, maybe, you can have a great arm and still throw picks. Just ask Jamarcus Russell about that. But anyways, can they just get in his head? That's going to be the big storyline in this game, I think.
I agree with Evan. Who can avoid the big turnover? Michigan, I don't think has enough offensive firepower to keep up with Washington, especially if they turn the ball over. We documented Washington's defensive struggles, previewing the Sugar Bowl, but to me, Michigan just cannot keep up with Washington offensively, especially if they're turning the ball over against Michael Penix and that explosive offense.
Okay, I somewhat disagree with that, because yes, if it's a competition between McCarthy and Michael Penix Jr.'s arm, it's not even a question. Washington's going to win by 2 scores, at least. But I think Michigan's going to see Texas had a lot of success on the ground game last week. They didn't start throwing with Ewers till later. Yes, they got behind because they literally could not stop Penix at all. But on offense, Texas had some positive things, and especially on the ground game early on. So if I'm Michigan, I'm looking around, I'm saying, well, let's ground and pound with Blake Corum. Let's ground and pound in general. So I think if you can keep Washington off the field, if you can ground and pound with Blake Corum, I do think you can actually keep up. But if it does turn into a game of McCarthy versus Penix, I think we know what way that's going to go. But
Right, we do. So let's talk about some key players here. For me, it's got to be, Blake Corum, Roman Wilson, Colson Loveland for Michigan offensively, and then Junior Colson and Mike Sanders still on the defensive side for Michigan. Evan, what do you think about the key players for the Wolverines?
key players for the Wolverines. My answer for Washington's a little more interesting, but I'm going to repeat exactly what I said for this one. Blake Corum. I think you got to run him. I think especially, I think McCarthy is a good quarterback, but in my opinion, he disappointed me a little last week. He made the plays he needed to, but those were more scripted plays. The 4th and 2 where they had the running back leak out on the outside, that wasn't really a great play by him. That was just a great design. I needed to see more from him last week. He didn't. So I think the key player, if Michigan's going to stay in this game because Washington will score points, is Blake Corum.
I completely agree with that. And obviously, the key player for for Washington is going to be Michael Penix Jr. We saw him light up Texas last week. Really, the reason the Huskies won the game and they're in the spot. He has to have another big game for Washington to, I think, even have a chance to win this game.
So I'll get to my answer. I think Washington's defense played a little better than I thought. They still gave up a lot, but they made timely plays, I guess you could say, which is all you can ask for if you're not a particularly great defense. Washington, one thing that's underrated about Washington is their O line. They get really good offensive line play. For Michael Penix, if you look at some of the throws where he's throwing 70 yards downfield, right? He's got a lot of time, so that helps too. But my player of the game is Rome, how do you say it? Odunze? Right.
Rome Odunze.
He's got to come alive because Michigan is going to probably do the Belichick formula or what most great defenses do, where they try to take the best player away. Now you can't take the quarterback away, so they're not going to take Penix away, but they're going to try to take away Rome Odunze like crazy. And can he beat a couple double teams? Maybe get some quick routes, maybe not the long developing ones they're used to. Can they get the quick or at least intermediate passing game going to him? Will be interesting to see.
I think that Romo Dunze will get his receiving yards in this game, right? You can't take a great wide receiver completely out of the game, but like Evan mentioned, can they take away those 40, 50-yard bombs that they've been accustomed to seeing up in Seattle throughout the season? So what's your storyline for this game for both teams, starting with Michigan?
I already said Michigan a little bit, but I will do both. Michigan is can they get the rush going like they did with Milroe? Alabama had the early, kind of shift where they went up 7-0 really quick, even though they didn't do much on offense. But Michigan stuck strong. They got in the backfield. They got after Milroe. Can they do the same thing? And for Washington, I would probably say it's what is your script? What are you doing? Like on defense, they're gonna have to stop the run, which I do think they're gonna struggle with. But on offense, particularly, what is your script? How are you going to adjust? Because the Texas defense is different than the Michigan defense. You got to be ready for that.
Yeah, so for Michigan, I think it's, get the run game going. Don't be one-dimensional against Washington because no disrespect to JJ McCarthy, but I don't believe that he can beat Washington just throwing the ball. You've got to get Blake Corum going and Donovan Edwards going as well. And then for Washington, complete opposite. You got to get the passing game going because I want to bring this up. At the end of the game, we saw starting running back Dylan Johnson go down. I don't know if I would guess he's going to play this week, but he's probably not going to be at full strength. And that for me is a big key.
Was he the player that went down on the 3rd down, right before Texas got the ball back, or was that earlier?
Last drive of the game.
Last drive of the game. Yeah, that was you. You got to take a knee there. I get it. You want to run the clock. They still have one timeout left. Just take a knee, get it down to 15. That was crazy. But yeah, we hope he can play it this week. Yeah.
Right. We do. I don't know if Washington can. I don't think Washington can beat Michigan just running the ball. Obviously, you got to get Penix, those wide receivers involved. So that's my key for Washington. All right, so let's go to score predictions. Evan, who do you think wins this game?
I picked Washington, so I'm going to stick with them. But I'm going to go. But where do I want to go with this? I think it's going to be intermediate scoring. I think it's going to be kind of like how Michigan kept it with Alabama, except Michigan's not going to be on the winning side this time. Give me a thriller. Give me Washington 28-24.
All right, so I am actually going to disagree with Evan here. I believe that defense wins championships. If you remember what I said before the Rose Bowl, and Michigan's defense is a whole lot better than Washington's. No disrespect to what those guys have done up in Seattle this year, but for me, defense wins championships. Give me the Wolverines 28-23.